go.
Give it a minute. We got people coming in. Good morning, everybody. Glad to see you with us again today for our webinar today. We have aligning expectations between board members and management companies. Thanks for joining us. Bob, could you advance the slide for me? I would like to thank our sponsors today. We have CPM and we also have Solitude Lake Management. Bob, would you like to go first?
Hi, everyone. This is I'm Bob Clegus, as you may know, and part of CPM. I'm the VP of Operations there and have been for a number of years. This is kind of unique that we're doing this online for me. I've done it a couple times in person, and I'm looking forward to getting you guys some information. And I'm sorry that we're not going to be able to do what I had hoped for if we were in doing this in person, and we were going to be handing out $100 bills. So, so unfortunately, the fact of COVID, we're not going to be able to do that part of the presentation. But thank you very much. I look forward to sharing with you.
I love it. Jennifer, you're up. Solitude Lake Management. Tell us.
Gosh, Bob, that was my idea. No, thank you for having us. We, obviously haven't seen each other in a long time for various reasons, but I'm happy to be here, happy to be a sponsor. For those of you who don't know me, I've been with Solitude for a little over 4 years and CAI like a month into it. So concurrently, Solitude takes care of all things lakes and ponds. So whether it's vegetation, maintenance, water testing, fountains, aeration, anything like that. So feel free to reach out to me. It's residential, commercial, anyone with a pond or a lake. But I'm really looking forward to seeing everybody, hopefully at the trade show in a few weeks. Yeah. And if you haven't seen already, Solitude is also hosting a webinar in a few weeks about nutrient remediation, and I will be your host. So I hope to see some of you there as well. But thank you so much.
Thank you. And Bob, just so that you know, I don't know if you saw in the chat, there's a lot of our members that are saying that you can mail it to them, their address, you can save it for them for next time you see them. So just wanted to throw that out there.
It was the personal contact that I was really looking forward to, and doing it by mail just wouldn't be the same.
Oh, good save. Good one. So Jennifer, we are going to have you introduce Bob. Tell us a little bit more.
Sure. So everybody, this is Bob. Bob's been around for a long time prior to getting into his involvement with CAI. Fun fact, he was an executive chef and has been cooking up all kinds of glorious things in restaurants and hotels here locally, and was one of the first people in our chapter to get his CMCA, AMS, and PCAM. He's been involved with a lot of committees, has been on the board several times and held different positions on the board and such, and has been very involved with the chapter for a really long time now. So we appreciate his involvement with our chapter for sure. And his heart-to-heart interview just recently launched. So if you haven't had the opportunity to take a look at his heart-to-heart interview, do so. It was pretty good. So welcome, Bob. Thank you for sharing with us today.
My pleasure. So I guess we'll get this going a little bit. First, I'm going to take and share some information and develop you as a community manager. And for those of you that previously sat in on this previous presentation, before I apologize for the redundancy of the message, many times the message has to be shared several times before it sticks. I know this from a personal experience because even with redundancy in CPM meetings, I will have someone say, I never talked about that. So I think that, saying these things time and time again will help, possibly help make it stick. So today we're going to take and talk a little bit about aligning expectations. This is kind of a unique format for, I guess, really for all of us, but from a presenter standpoint, it's really, I think it's even more challenging because sometimes we're kind of playing off of the people that are in the room and getting their direct input. And if you have some questions or chat types items, you're welcome to put those in. And I suspect Kathy or Jennifer will pose that question to me because I can't see them myself. But you know, I want to take and get going on this. So let's just get started. So aligning expectations is the most challenging part of our business, and it's primarily the greatest challenge because we're dealing with personalities, we're dealing with tasks, we're dealing with multiple personalities, not only from the decision makers, but also the people that are getting the decision put upon them. So one of the first part of the disconnect, I think, becomes when the management companies are talking to associations. And when we make our presentation to the associations, that we kind of, we talk about all the things that we're great at, and we tend to talk about that it's so grandiose, and then we take care of everything. So we have a real lobster kind of mentality or presentation standpoint for our clients, and that's the first feel that they get for us. And sometimes in the companies, the person that's presenting the company isn't the same person as the CEO, and so the CEO, their ideal of the perfect service level is more like a really great steak. And if those of you were here when I did this before, I've upgraded from a really good hamburger to a really good steak. And I think that that's probably a little bit better assessment of what a CEO expects, because I don't think that any of us would expect that our services were less than a steak. But when we're doing our presentations to the boards, what they're hearing is that we do everything, that it is an endless buffet of things that we do, and we never share. I shouldn't say we never, because I think I do, but I think that for the most part, the industry doesn't share that there are limitations, that you can only go through the buffet so many times per month. And but the disconnect is such that they don't hear that. They hear lobster, they think endless buffet. And I think that that's where our disconnect begins. So how do we manage these different expectations and between the management company and the association? And then we have this third party in here that thinks that we're wizards, that we can not only we sell great services, but we have an endless buffet, and we have clients that think that we can magically just make things happen. And I think that that's a big, diverse group, because how do you present a buffet? I mean, in my hotel days, it would take us days to prepare for buffets, where homeowners have this tendency of thinking that we magically can make that person start picking up after their dog, or that we can magically get someone to stop parking in front of their house, or whatever it might be. So our expectations are typically developed through our communications, how we answer the phone, how we email, how we text, how we communicate in general. They will also think about build their expectations based on an experience that they've had with us. Did they have great service last time? Did you answer them within 10 minutes? You know, I think that sometimes we are our own villain, because we think that, oh, I got this email and I'm going to respond right away. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, the expectation is that, well, I just sent you an email 10 minutes ago. I mean, I think that probably some of us, if not all of us, have had that telephone call from a board member that said, did you get my email I sent you 10 minutes ago? So I think that if you're not careful, by raising the bar, I mean, it's like you can never take away something that you've given somebody without their feelings being hurt. And so I think that sometimes when we do things quickly, maybe the help build or set the expectation properly is to say, hey, I just saw your email and I was getting ready to go out the door and I thought that it was important that I get back to you. So I'm back to you and then I'm on my way, or I just glanced and I saw it and I wanted to get to you right away, but I know I can't normally do that. You know, or somehow or another, let them know that you did something unusual versus that it's and becomes an expectation. Sometimes the expectations develop through what somebody else says. So a homeowner says, Bob's the greatest, and they call me and they automatically assume that Bob's the greatest because their neighbor told them that I was. Or you should call this particular company because they respond very, very promptly. And so sometimes someone else is setting that expectation. And sometimes the expectation is set by your competition from a management standpoint anyway. And the companies are creating, sending out advertisements to associations or making presentations and talking about the lobster, and you're still, you know, you're in the middle of things and you're trying to sell steak and somebody out there's talking about lobster. And I think that sometimes that's a challenge. I think that, you know, the other idea of, you know, flipping the coin to the other side is the association is going to, association members going to draw their expectation based on how they see these things as well. So, I mean, I think, and as an association, you have to think about, am I being realistic? You know, sometimes, you know, from an association standpoint, are you replying right away? And now all of a sudden, when the manager gives you an email, they're expecting you to reply in 10 minutes, and you've got a full-time job, you like to play golf, whatever the thing may be. So, you know, from a management standpoint and an association standpoint, these expectations are developed. So just talking about, you know, some of the communication things that set the expectation would be, as we were talking about, the marketing materials that you might be receiving as an association. From a management company, it might be what someone else is establishing as a standard practice because of their marketing material or presentation that they made, or they met someone in the elevator or at a ball game, or just sat next to somebody and started talking to someone, and they suddenly found out that they were a board member. And sometimes, you know, it can be board member to board member. It can be like, you know, you're talking to someone that's a board member, and they want to they kind of elaborate on what their level of service is, and you're elaborating on yours, and somehow or another you can kind of maybe read between the two services what maybe a standard should be. So past experience, what was the feeling that they had with their last experience with you, your company, your competitor? I mean, I think that this is really more so from an associate or from a management company standpoint is, you know, what is the perception of you or your company, and is it being driven kind of by your competitor? You know, sometimes, you know, everything doesn't go as we planned, and we're working towards trying to build out from a negative experience and try to either fix what has happened to somebody, or fixing a general problem. And sometimes you get the opportunity that it was a real attaboy or attagirl moment, and now you're getting to be able to build on that experience and increase that, improve that expectation, or just build that relationship because you had a great experience. This is one I love because as a chef, I had this opportunity a lot of different times, is that are you a king or a queen because the previous experience was so bad? You know, there are, no one changes management companies just because things are going wonderful. So typically there's a honeymoon period. But you know, from an association standpoint, you can be that king or queen too, and by cooperating and helping build the relationship and partnering with your newly assigned manager and establishing with them a good communication and an ability to share information to them so that they can get up to speed quicker. Come on now. There we go. You know, and sometimes the past experience is building it, or the expectation is developed because of the response time or inconsistent services. Word of mouth is a great opportunity to have people share their experience. And, you know, what did a neighbor or friend share with the client about your competitor? We're always talking to our clients, trying to first off, find out if we're doing what they want. And when we are getting the things done that they want, asking them to share their experience and share it with us, because it's always good to know that you're meeting their needs. But if they get the opportunity to be your champion at some particular point and talk to their friends or neighbors, it's helpful from a company standpoint and a company reputation standpoint. We do the same things for board members. It's probably a little bit smaller circle because we're talking in our managers meetings about the communities that are really got things together, and then we're also maybe having workshop periods when we're trying to figure out how can we better serve an association that's maybe having a little bit more having more challenges. Right now, probably the biggest thing that affects us in the level of expectation, I think, is what goes on Google and Yelp and these billboards, these online billboards. And the hard part with them is that often, you know, you get one bad one and you get three good ones, and the bad ones stick out. And sometimes these billboards really do gravitate to displaying the negative more so than the positives. So I think that makes it even more important that you have a good customer service type system to be able to respond to these people that are writing these Google reviews and trying to display online that maybe their expectation was unrealistic, and that even though it is unrealistic, that you'd like to talk to them offline to help them solve their problem. Oddly enough, most of the time when I get those kinds of reviews, I do reply in that regard. And I very rarely get any feedback from them. It's like they had their opportunity to vent, and then they don't want to fix the problem. They just wanted to vent. So you have to make the effort to take and show that maybe their concern wasn't completely justified, or that it was an association decision, or that most of the time it's a governing document situation, and that that there's nothing that can be done about it. The fact that you can't put a trash can in front of your garage is just the fact you can't put a trash can in front of your garage, and they don't want to accept it. So sometimes that's what you have, to some degree, that's what you have to say. So be cognizant of what's going on out in Google. I think from an association standpoint, by the same token, you can't put every bit of faith in what you read in Google, and you have to kind of look at the big picture. If an association, I mean, if a management company gets one particular bad review, and they're getting 6 others that are great, that's probably should be a pretty good telltale that things are better than worse with that particular group. And I think that, you know, if you gravitate to the negative, that you're probably going to miss out on some opportunities with management companies that are better than that one particular review. If you see a history of them, then obviously that's something different. But I think from the most part that you'll find that we have great management companies in St. Louis, and most of us, if not all of us, are concerned about our reputation, and we want to do a good job. So I mean, I think that this is probably one thing that that is a challenge in our marketplace, is some of our competitors are doing some direct marketing. I think that the hard part for an association, from an association standpoint, is that it's really difficult for you to determine whether or not, or what you're being sold, how accurate it is. Again, because I think that you're hearing buffet, they're selling lobster, and it's hard for you to get to a point where you can really drill into what you think that they're going to provide. So I think that I would suggest that from an association standpoint, is to not hear lobster and try to hear steak, and ask your questions as to how they deliver their product. You know, references are always good. I think that in most cases, though, association management companies are brighter than giving out referrals to people that don't like them. So you can pretty much anticipate that whoever you talk to is going to talk good about them. But I think that if you can have a good series of questions that you ask each of your prospective management companies, you've asked them directly, and then you've asked their referring companies, and then try to compare and see how those particular things match, and what they see as a value in their current company. I would say to an association, there's never, things have to be bad for you to want to leave. I think that you lose you lose some of the historical value that a current management company has. So I think that from a expectation standpoint, you should do all that you can to make sure to try to make what you have work. And if you can't, then I would then just recommend that you look at associations and try to pin the two sides together, what the management company's lobster/steak sounded like, and the information that they provided you, and then compare that to the references and try to see if that association really thinks that they're getting the steak or not. You know, I think that one of the things that really is, I think, probably more good than bad, is that having an educated client. And an educated client has a better understanding of what the roles of the management company are, and it's easier for them to draw what's a reasonable expectation. You know, if you think that the management company should call you back in 10 minutes, what other, I think you need to take and think back to what other services are available to you that get back to you within 10 minutes. Make sure that the expectation that you have on your management company really isn't any different than what you have on any other of your service providers. I mean, an HVAC company might be able to get to you the same day if your air conditioner is out, but they might not get to you for 2 weeks if you just need your furnace cleaned. It's about the priorities, and the management companies, I think for the most part, are probably going to say the same thing. If you call and it's an emergency, there's a roof leak, we're going to be right on it. And if it's something that can be prioritized out, then we'd like to prioritize it out so that we have some flexibility for that next emergency that comes in. So from an association standpoint, I think that gauging expectations of a management company should be similar to other services that you might get. So, you know, if it, you know, is the this would probably be something to take and try to drill through to if you were looking at an association management company and trying to figure out what their delivery time might be for certain things, or if they have capabilities for their association members to self-serve, and web portals and things of that nature are available to through a lot of the management companies that can take and provide immediate satisfaction to some things. Signs. So one of the things that I think is a big sign of a problem is if you're not getting client referrals, if you're doing a survey of some sort, or just kind of interviewing your clients, or you're asking your managers, hey, can I talk to so-and-so for a referral on a particular account? And if you're not getting referrals, then I'd say that there's something that you need to look at with that particular account. If you're getting complaints, same thing. You know, if you're getting feedback through things are getting escalated more so, then I'd say that there's probably an expectation thing. So a lot of in our organization, you're going to take and work with a customer service person. It's going to get escalated to the manager, and if the manager can't seem to resolve it, then it's I need to talk to your boss, and then you know, someone up the ladder gets the call and tries to resolve the problem. So I think that from my perspective, the more things that I get involved in from a client standpoint is when I know that I've got some expectation issues going on in that particular community, and it might be that we're not meeting the need, or it might be just that their expectation isn't realistic, or there's really a problem that just needs some additional effort from our team. I kind of jumped into that one. You'll find that with me. I get randomly talking, and I'll talk about something that we'll talk about again. So my apologies in advance. So if you get a lot of letters from your or emails from your clients, if they don't even respond, that's probably even a bigger signal that there's some type of disconnect going on within the within your group. And I think that probably, as much as it's silence, it probably speaks volumes of things that of something that you need to address. And I would encourage you that if your clients aren't talking to you, that you figure out that there's an that there's a problem. From an association standpoint, I mean, I think you can have some of these same things. You can have where the managers maybe complaining to the client a little bit that they just can't get to everything, or the the silence part is that if you're not hearing from your manager or they're not responding to you, it might be an expectation issue on your part from an association standpoint. I think that even though, you always get to the point where, or get to that old saying, well, the customer's always right, and the customer is, can be right most of the time. But I think that the relationship between an association and the management company is a two-way relationship. It isn't just us. It is us serving them. That is our job. That's the reason that we're in business. But it is a partnership, that it can't be just kind of one way. It has to be, the association has to recognize that the management companies got certain expectations too, and they have certain needs. We need that partnership to be able to accomplish them. So the yin and yang of expectations, I kind of built this just to take and try to be able to demonstrate from both sides that there is a that it is a partnership, and that we need both sides to be either working together or could have kind of the same issue from a different perspective. So one of the things when I'm hearing, when I'm talking with associations that are contemplating our services, the one thing that I hear often is that the board and owners can't ever reach their manager directly. But from the same token, from the management, the manager can't get the other projects if they're on the phone. So it's like this, we have this torn thing where we're trying to meet what the association wants, but we're also still trying to get stuff done. And I think that a lot of times there's a disconnect, because we have plenty of board members that will call on a regular basis, and they will take up a percentage of that manager's time. A 30-minute phone call takes the manager away from doing something for 30 minutes. So I think that it's one of those things where the association and the management company have to put a value to the amount of time of that phone call. Was it worth the 30 minutes for that particular thing, or would it have been better to take and let someone to spend that 30 minutes actually getting bids or whatever it is that was needed? So I think that a lot of times there's a lot of time wasted in email and telephone calls. And if you think about it from a daily standpoint, a 30-minute phone call really only gives that manager, if they had all 30-minute phone calls, the ability to have 16 calls in one particular day, and then nothing else gets done. We can't get anything done when we're on the telephone. So if they're on the telephone with community A, they can't take a call from community B. So I think that it's those types of things that we need to understand, the yin and yang of why we're not always getting, why we can't answer every phone call directly. So the manager doesn't return calls, responding to 45 inquiries and emails and phone calls per day leaves them 5 minutes to consume half of their day. A manager, when they're getting inundated with calls, it is hard for them to, again, get back to the work that needs to be done. So again, I think that it's important for both parties to recognize the value that goes into creating these emails and responding to them. So if there are other means within that organization to be able to communicate, whether it be through web portals or such, I would highly recommend the association try to adapt to them, because that's what helps us be more cost effective to associations. this is from a management standpoint, this is a tough business to be profitable in. From an association standpoint, you want to get the things done, but you don't want to spend more than you need to. And the reality of our particular industry, if you compare us to rental, a rental management company is going to be charging $50 to $100 per unit per month to manage a apartment community, or, which could be similar to a condo association. In our organization, or not in our organization, in our market, I mean, you're looking at costs that could be as much as a third less than that, and or 8 times less than that. So I think that I bring that up because I think that from an expectation standpoint, associations need to recognize that we recognize that we are a pure expense. The difference between us and the rental is that a management company generates income for an investor in an apartment community. But in our industry as a management company, we're just an expense, and we recognize that. And we tried our level best to give you the value, really a greater value than the dollars that we charge, because we recognize that we're just an expense, and there are people that can do what we do. Maybe they can't, maybe they don't have all the tools that we have, and they don't have the experience, but people can replace management companies. There's plenty of self-managed communities out there that are doing it. Some of them are doing it better than others, but rarely do they have the tools that a management company typically offers, and would normally be very short on the experience level that we provide. So we are always trying to give you the best. All the management companies are trying to give you the best value they can. So I think that this is another one. We get an association here that the management company was rude or unprofessional, and I've taken plenty of rude or unprofessional calls from board members or homeowners. I mean, it is a thing that happens. We work, and I'm sure you do too, work to not lose sight of trying to help somebody, but sometimes the calls do get out of hand. I think that in both cases, we need to understand that, things like this can escalate, and you've got a person that, you've got a manager that may or may not be able to make the decision to help somebody, and you've got this person on the other side, the homeowner that has so what I'm looking for. They're actively involved in their particular situation. So there's a lot of sentiment that goes with it, and maybe frustration, the fact that they can't get something done. So keep in mind from both sides that you have a volatile situation, and they can go sideways kind of quick sometimes, and that either party or both could be a part of why it got out of control. But by the same token, we also have to be cognizant of that. We need to work as a board. We need to work with homeowners to make them aware that, the management company isn't always the one that's making all of or they're not making the decisions. The board is, that the governing documents dictate a lot of this. And by doing some of that, you're setting the expectation that someone can understand when we say to them that the governing documents don't allow us for you to have a pool in your backyard, an above ground pool or whatever it might be, that they have heard before that the governing documents are what's dictating it. It's not the management company, and possibly it's not the association board. It's what the documents are saying. So I think that they have to hear that as well, and they should probably hear that at every annual meeting, because again, it takes several times for someone to hear something for it to stick. From an association standpoint, I've been waiting too long for my maintenance issues to be resolved, and sometimes it's the management. I've been begging the contractor to get the maintenance issue resolved. So sometimes, you know, and I would say almost more so that the things are somewhat out of our control as well. I mean, it's not like we can always get someone to go out there when somebody wants them there. It just because someone called and says I'm home today doesn't necessarily mean that I can have someone there today. So it's like trying to, again, establish those expectations and revert them back to what's the expectation. If you call Charter, would they be out at your home today to fix your cable? Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. But if you just needed your furnace cleaned, the likelihood is that they're going to schedule that weeks out, not tomorrow or not today. So why do we have to pay for lender questionnaires? Why are 90% of lender questionnaires condos a rush? You know, I think that that's one of the things that we see in our industry is that, you know, the association members are like, well, why is that an extra fee? And I think in most cases that when an association creates work that's not quantifiable, that we don't know how many resales we're going to do a month, that it is probably better for the association to not have that built into their management fee and allow the owners to pay for them as they need them. But by the same token, we get a lot of pushback. It's like, well, why is it so much? Or why is there this rush fee? And it's because the title company contacted us the day before they needed it, and we had to stop what we were doing to provide it. So I think that, you know, again, it's trying to know why these different things happen. Untimely and inaccurate financial reports we hear about, and you know, but from the other standpoint is that we find that boards aren't preparing themselves for the manager or for the board meeting. So the manager comes to the meeting expecting that they're going to get a bunch of work done, and every or most are just opening the packet when they get to their seat. So I think the expectation is for the board to take and have a productive meeting, and we're trying to supply them with the information to do that. The board needs to take and, you know, be a little bit more authoritative with their board members and say, hey, we need to have a productive meeting. And one of the ways that we can have a productive meeting is by reviewing this information in advance. From an association standpoint, yeah, you have every right to expect timely or accurate financial reports. And if you're not getting those, then you should talk to your manager and or maybe further up the ladder if they can't help you resolve that. I think that this is probably a big one. You know, as soon as we say that someone can't have a shed or something like that, they're telling us that there's 2 or 3 more in the community that that have them, and the board's being selective in their enforcement. So again, it's like, you know, one situation can kind of create the others. So I think that it's important that the board have an expectation that they're either going to, I think the best expectation is enforcing your governing documents. If the second expectation should be is if you're not going to enforce parts of it, then I think the association really should create an agenda to rewrite the documents based on the things that the community wants enforced. By not doing it, I think by doing selective enforcement, you just create a situation where it's more difficult to enforce the things that you do want to enforce. So sometimes the list of the association feels like the list of tasks are not getting done. And and the manager's feeling like they're drowning under a never-ending task list. Again, I think that the association has to recognize the value of the things that they need done, and they need to understand that it's not an endless buffet, that there's certain limitations that a manager has. Pardon me. And understand that at times the association needs to prioritize things so that things go on to the next month's agenda when you can't reasonably get to them. Now, the flip side to all of this is that, if you're not getting, maybe the reason you're getting tasks done, not getting tasks done is because another association is making that manager drown. So in those particular cases, if you feel like your association's not the perpetrator of the drowning manager, then I think that, again, you need to talk to your manager, and then maybe you talk to further up the ladder to get some feedback on whether you're the cause or not, or whether your expectations are unreasonable. So from an association standpoint, and sometimes we get feedback that there is, as I'm talking to association management companies, that there's a lack of technology. I get the same feedback from managers in that sometimes. So I think that this is something that association and management companies need to kind of talk about what it is that can be available, and how it can be used to benefit the association. Contractors is not being overseen by management, but sometimes there are not enough hours to be a manager and a general contractor. So again, this is kind of relative to what the association's expectations are, and the value of the management fee, and how much time might be allotted. Taking minutes is complicated, so the manager needs to do them. Sometimes people just don't want to take them. So we get a secretary that says, I'll be a secretary, but I don't want to take those minutes. And it's kind of interesting, is minutes really aren't difficult to take. I think it's just because people are accustomed to the minutes being almost a written dialogue of what was said. Minutes really need to be a listing of the decisions that were made, the motions that were made, who was in attendance, what was the date, where was it, things of that nature. And if you educate your boards on that and explain to them why maybe having a more succinct minutes versus the dialogue is better for them overall, that you can get them to a point where they can do the meeting minutes, because it is difficult, in my opinion, for a manager to take minutes and take manager notes. So this is another opportunity to kind of get everybody to understand the expectations, and that minutes are the documents of the association. The manager notes are the actions that that manager is going to take in that particular action. So the board approved the retaining wall, and the manager's notes are, I'm going to contact ABC retaining wall, and I'm going to tell them that they need to have these specifications, and that we can't start until the end of September. And those are the kinds of notes, whereas the minutes are going to reflect what was the motion, who said yes, who said no, and that kind of stuff. And does the manager provide enough direction? And or versus the board never asked me what I think they should do. I think that one of the greatest benefits of a community manager is to have someone there that has experience and be able to ask them, what do you think? If you're not asking that person, they're probably not jumping out there and saying anything, because maybe they're not feeling like their opinion is welcomed. So I think that an association does themselves a disservice by not making that, having that expectation for the manager to have involvement and to voice their opinion, and then the board votes. Frequent management or manager turnover is an association complaint, and the managers are thinking, geez, this job is sucking the life out of me. So I think that, I think that again, it kind of goes back to what I said earlier, is that the association has some responsibility to have reasonable expectations, because this job can easily blow up and have everybody on our shoulder asking us to do something for them. And we need sometimes help and prioritization and and boards that will accept that sometimes they don't get to be first, but they know that at times when it is absolutely necessary, they will be first. Again, it's that partnership. So a reality check of expectation. 99% of the number I pulled out of my hat is probably actually greater than that. Is that of the association, 99% of the association use and management companies provide portfolio management practices. And I wanted to point this out, is that it is a compromise for both parties by having portfolio management. And it's because the management company needs to be transparent that they have a service limitation directly related to the hours that the fixed rate management fee supports. If a management company is not only selling lobsters, but selling an endless buffet, this probably doesn't apply to them. But to a management company that's going to be effective, in my opinion, we need to be telling the clients that this fee covers these services. And I typically try to drill it down to that there's a number of hours that go with it. So that's just kind of the same thing. But anyway, I think that, my point for you is that we can't, that an association that isn't getting isn't getting portfolio management service, they have one manager. That manager is there for their sole benefit. They're sitting by the phone or sitting at their desk doing association work that is specific to one association. The phone rings, it's relative to one specific association. Everything is done for that by that manager for that one association. The problem that most associations have is that they don't have the volume of people that can support that kind of relationship. So portfolio management means that you get a percentage of a manager's time relative to the amount of that management fee that it takes to support an entire manager. So knowing that it's a compromise, my recommendation is use that time wisely and to some degree know how it's being used. Okay. So how do we align the expectations? I think that there needs to be a management company versus association service audit. And I think that that's kind of done, not necessarily done formally, might be done in the beginning phase when you're first meeting an association. And from time to time, there needs to be a conversation with the manager, and there needs to be a conversation with the board. And it might be just from the manager to the board saying, am I meeting your expectations? Is there something that you're not getting? And then at least creating the conversation as to where you're at, in the relationship. Are they looking for something that you're not getting? Are you thinking that they're giving you too much work? It opens up that dialogue. Promise of expectation versus reality. I mean, I think that a lot of times we find that in the early phase that if the board has that buffet kind of mentality that suddenly we're coming in and giving them steak and they're not understanding why. Or maybe there is a situation where they're not even getting steak because some other community is taking up their time. But I think that you have to, the promise of expectation has to be very close to reality. So when you're out selling, I think that the better approach is to sell steak, so that when you do get the relationship going, that they don't see you as a lobster. From an internal audit standpoint, I think defining top client complaints, we do that. We've done that over the years, and that's been one of our methods of problem solving, is that when certain complaints are consistent, or certain needs are consistent, that we're looking for a method to meet those association needs. I mean, I think that the interesting thing about our industry, pardon me, is that even as much as I think that we sometimes, there are management companies that profess out there that we're going to customize the service for you. I think that the reality of that is that almost all associations are basically the same, even if the walls and grounds are different. They are dealing with people, dealing with violation type issues. It's almost always exactly the same. The people change, the letterhead changes, but the situations don't. So can we circumvent those complaints through better communication, better processes, a different structure? Should there be customer service answering those particular things versus the manager? There's a lot of different ways to take a look at that, but I think that it's about the analysis, taking a step back from the particular issue or issues and trying to see what the best practice is to resolving that matter. I think we all have, I mean, I go to CEOMC from time to time, and I'm going next week to another organization, ACAM CEO. And I think that what is interesting is also when you talk on a national level, the system or the things don't change. So the best practices that management companies use are pretty similar across the nation. It is probably more so how good we are at them versus what we do. And I think that, we do have some associations that will from time to time be like, well, this is the way we should do things. And I like to think that the management companies have the best experience, and we should be taking the lead on how things are being handled, because we've done it. As I said the other day, we've already done it all the wrong ways. We know the right ways, the best ways, and the ways to get things done. And we need our associations to trust that we have an expertise. So from an audit standpoint, we talk about them can't reach the manager directly. Is the manager's portfolio too large? Is the manager spending too much time in the field? Sometimes there's not enough desk time. Is the manager underperforming? Is the community over demanding? These are all things that we need to look at from an internal standpoint to take and see what's going on and what is it that we can do and or address. And all of these things would be things that you could possibly say could cause a manager not to be available. Again, if they're not returning phone calls or emails, we've had people call and say, I called and they didn't leave a message. And then they were wondering why we didn't call them back because, well, you saw my caller ID came in. Well, we get a lot of calls over time that someone recognized that they had a wrong extension and hung up. So, you know, these are the types of things that we're going to try to drill into to figure out why it is that a manager might or an association might feel like a manager is not getting back to them as well as possible. You know, sometimes there is, someone's not returning calls or emails, and it's because you've already had 15 from them by noon. So, I mean, I think that, again, these are all things that if you take and look into them, you can kind of drill into whether it's a big problem or it's an isolated problem. Rude or unprofessional, or the staff members being rude? How do you handle conversations? Do you give them some time to vent? I mean, these are things that we've talked about in CAI programs, is how to calm a situation, disarm them. Do you try to get them to the right party quickly? I mean, I think that that's one thing that I've heard from time to time, or I feel like even in myself, is that I call somebody, I give them my whole story, and then they're like, oh, you need to talk to them. You need to talk to this department. And then you go through the whole process all over again. You explain all the things that the reason for your call. And then they're like, oh, no, I'm sorry, you need to talk to, and at some particular point, you just get frustrated with how many times do I have to tell my story? So my recommendation is that as soon as you can figure out whether you can help this person or not is when you should be redirecting them if you know that you're not going to be able to help them. You know, I think that it's in today's world kind of interesting is that when I called people back, they've left me this message, or they said to me, thank you so much for calling me back. And I'm thinking to myself, why is that? I mean, is there that many people out there that don't return phone calls? And I'm not talking about managers. I'm just talking about people in general. And I'm just thinking, wow, you know, that's weird. I would think that most people would be getting phone calls back. You know, I think at some point you have to determine whether you can't fix the call, and if they're being so abusive that you have to disconnect the call. That's obviously a last resort, and how that's handled is something that every manager should know based on their own corporate expectations. And, you know, do you get the support of the board when you do have these have a rude owner? And I think that that's important, that the board will be supportive and say, hey, look, you know, they're giving you 15 emails a day. You need to just say, from now, you have our permission to answer him once per day. Answer him at 4:30 or something along those lines. Maintenance issues taking a long time. Was there work order? Is there something, is a maintenance technician overlooking it or avoiding it? Certainly have heard those stories where, you know, it wasn't the premier job and the maintenance tech or even the contractor was like, you know, and I'll get to that. That's going to take a ladder or something along those lines, and they just keep putting it off, and you wind up having someone disgruntled because they didn't get something done very promptly. Did something happen in front of it? Is the board avoiding a decision? I mean, certainly I think boards have to recognize, we need their assistance by recognizing that when they don't make a decision, they often create work for us and make our lives a little bit more difficult. We can't move forward on a particular task if we haven't been given a decision. I think this is a big disconnect in associations, and is that if you like your contractor or your management company and or their maintenance team, that if you can have some forgiveness, so to speak, that you allow them to get it done so that the work's getting done evenly throughout their portfolio of business, because it helps them with consistency. I think sometimes, you know, if you think of a contractor that you say, hey, I need this done one week from now, they might be in a situation where they have to escalate their staffing to be able to meet this higher demand. And now you're suddenly working with people that you aren't familiar with. And then all of a sudden, then, you know, September, October comes, most of the work's been done. And now this guy's on to a different job. And you might have had someone that you really liked. So ideally, I think that it's helpful when an association has a big picture kind of mentality that, you know, if something can get done in November, why does it have to be done in March? You know, it isn't a race to get everything done in the budget. I think that from a budgeting standpoint, spreading your work out throughout the course of the year is beneficial. It allows you opportunities to adjust in the event that something happens. You have a big snowfall, or you have a retaining wall that collapses, and suddenly you need to replace it. Instead of doing something when you get everything done in March, then you're kind of digging into reserves for those things, and it doesn't give you doesn't give you any flexibility. Right? Now it's acting up again. There we go. Could better communication relieve the frustration? You know, sometimes you know, you can send out broadcast emails to make people aware of what's going on. Direct emails or letters relative to the particular work order, things of that nature, are usually looked forward to. And sometimes the work gets done at the wrong address, and that's why it took too long. So it's really beneficial to get some closing type email or letter that goes out that lets people know that you think you got the work done. Paying for questionnaires. I think a lot of times that association owners don't recognize the amount of work that goes into creating a resale document and the process that comes after moving somebody in, and that's what those fees cover. I think that, you know, from a corporate standpoint, I think everybody needs to be armed with what you think from a corporate standpoint, the CEOs out there, what you think is the reason for you to having those fees, and everybody should be armed with that. And I think from an association standpoint, they need to understand that this is an extra service, and it's something that the association, I think, is best not paying for, because again, you can't quantify it, and it would just be an added fee and would make management fees higher. So so inaccurate financial reports are untimely. Is there a problem in the accounting process? This would be probably more of an analysis from a management company standpoint. Is there something else holding it up? Are there steps that in the process that do not matter? I think that that's probably, you know, one of the things that we see frequently with associations is that, you know, this is the way we've always done it. And I think probably management companies probably suffer often from the same thing. And I think that we all need to take a step back from time to time and look at what we're doing and put a value to what it is that we're doing and determine whether it's worthwhile or not. You know, sometimes it can be software issues that are causing the inaccuracies. You know, the old saying, garbage in equals garbage out. So if someone's not getting the information incorrectly, that could be creating the inaccuracies. I think the important part is what actions can be taken to correct the problem. And, you know, are you using generally acceptable accounting practices, and I think probably most of us are, if we have enough people in our organization to divvy out all these different separations. Why can't I have a shed or a barn? Again, it is, the board or manager being consistent with its citing violations, or the governing documents being interpreted correctly. Was there a reason previous requests were approved? I mean, I think that, the last one kind of goes to the, the comment I made earlier that someone's going to state, well, there's 3 more sheds in here just like mine, and now why can't I have one? Well, maybe, a previous board authorized it, and just because a previous board authorized it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a free-for-all now. Maybe, they did it incorrectly. Maybe they didn't get back fast enough and it was auto-approved. A whole lot of things in there, and I think that probably in this particular case, getting your attorney involved or your association attorney involved would be helpful to know whether you can get the genie back in the bottle or not. So frequent turnover of manager and or board members. Are we doing some exit interviews to gauge the reasons that that a person's getting leaving being a manager or not being a board member? I mean, we see this from time to time that the associations will be frustrated if they're losing or getting frequent managers, but from our perspective, sometimes getting frequent board members is just as frustrating for us because we're constantly having to teach an new association member how to be a board member, what are the responsibilities, what's the role. I think that a board needs to take a moment and think about why is it they can't get a new board member. And I talk to associations from time to time, and they'll be, well, or I'll be at an annual meeting and they'll be like, well, the board member stood up there and they said, well, I do this, this, and this, and I took care of this, this, and this. And then, by the way, I'm really tired of being a board member and I'd like someone else to step up. And you just told them that it was a bunch of work. And I just think that the associations don't grasp that that the reason they can't get board members may not be able to get board members is because of the work that they put on them, and that people have full-time jobs and aren't looking to maybe donate their time as much as they have in years past. And we need to analyze from both sides why it is, if we're losing managers, the management company needs to analyze that. If board members are being constantly turned over, then the association needs to analyze that. And one of the ways of doing that is just making the experience better. So, the management company can look for ways to make the manager experience better. Associations should look to see how we make the association board member experience better. And actually the management company could probably provide a little bit of help in that regard as well. Lack of technology or using available technology company provides, or are you a dinosaur? We hear a lot about dinosaurs and people that they don't have email, they don't have this, they don't have that. The reality is that 10 years ago there were less people that had email than there are today, and it's progressing. We're always not going to, not maybe always, but we're going to have to take care of doing things, some things on paper and some things by statute. We really probably should do by paper, but I think you have to keep on producing the paper when you have to, so that we can support the people that haven't made a technology change. But the trend is that more and more people are adapting to technology. Not being overseen by management. is the manager providing the level that's called for in the management agreement? I think that there's probably a lot of confusion in that regard to what that expectation is. I think that we need to define that more so that the clients aren't expecting us to be subcontractors. I think that we need to explain that one of the things that we bring to the table is our experience with contractors. We have a greater confidence level that they're going to do things the right way. And versus the board member that has a friend that does asphalting, and we need to talk to him. What can be done to improve the communication between contractor management and the board? I mean, I think email and broadcast emails and tying the communications together so everybody's seeing what everybody else is getting and very aware of what's going on. All right, so just taking some time here to align reasonable expectations. I think that getting multiple bids prior to committing to a project is an unreasonable expectation. I think that to help boards and management companies, that we need to take and decide what GL code the cost is going to go to, so that we know if there's money in the budget for this expense. Is there a reason to go out and get multiple bids if you already have a contractor that you like, that has served you well, and that hasn't had a significant cost increase or giving you a real reason to look for another bid? I think that I always ask my clients is how much would the board have to save to risk using an unproven contractor? I think that that's the thing that an association board can really focus on. Is like, well, we've really been happy with ABC Landscaping, but we need to get bids. Well, in 3 years, there hasn't been a cost increase, or it's been 1 or 2 or 3%. Well, it's like, that seems normal, but you really like them. But what makes you think that the gas prices drop, or did labor prices drop, that might make you think that getting a bid that somehow or another this person has come out of whack? So anyway, I think that the board needs to have reasonable expectations on the manager and recognize that putting them through a 3-bid process is a time-consuming thing that might that time might be more valuable used some other way. Frequent owner, board member, manager calls. With the frequencies of calls, am I finding it difficult getting getting to our prioritized projects? Probably. All parties need to recognize that the calls and meetings take time away, just kind of like the previous slide. And this is something that you can utilize, is just to try to limit the phone calls, is go into the phone call with a strategy to get out of it. How do I get on to my next task? And this shouldn't be used with everybody, but it can be used when you have the necessity. If you have someone that's kind of sucking the life out of you from an association standpoint, then I think that should do this. Now, this is just as a useful tool for board members, because you get homeowner calls that will be that someone's calling you and complaining about something, and you don't want to give up your personal time to give up 30 minutes or an hour of your day to listen to someone vent. So if you know that a particular person is sucking the life out of you as a board member, you should go into it with a strategy on how am I going to answer this person's question? How am I going to make them comfortable that we're following up on their request? Or how do I tell them, I'm sorry, but that's what the governing documents say? But have some kind of strategy to conclude the call as you're picking it up. So, I mean, again, goes back to, the 1 hour old email, and they're saying, did you get my voicemail? Or did you get my email? So sometimes, having some level of response that, an auto reply, whether it be in your voicemail that I'm out of the office today, or I'm in, I'm doing property inspections today, and I'll check my emails or my voicemails at the end of the day and get back to anybody that has a high priority to it. I think that having some a recommendation as to how they should prioritize their call for you or their email, and maybe not the email, more so the call. If you leave a voicemail that might say something to the effect that I'm out on property, and if this is an urgent matter, please let me know that you'd like me to get a call back to you today. Otherwise, I'll plan on calling you back tomorrow. Something like that, where you can kind of set the expectation that you're not going to return every call by the end of the day, so you don't have anybody sitting by their phone thinking you're going to return the call. So having more so, I think this is kind of important, because sometimes, the voicemail is, I'm sorry, I'm not at my desk and I can't take your call right now, but it's very important to me, and I really appreciate if you leave a message. And they don't know that you're not in the office. That sounds like as soon as you get off the next call, you're going to be calling somebody back. So if the more that you can kind of set the expectation with that person in advance, the more easily it's going to be for you to meet or exceed their expectation. Because what happens if you don't get any calls and the person says, oh, it's okay, you can call me tomorrow, and you find that you got your inspection done at 3 o'clock and you have time to return some phone calls, and you call them back, and then suddenly you're like, oh my God, this is wonderful. I thought you were going to call me back today, but you called me. I thought you were going to call me back tomorrow, but you called me back today. So I'm even happier because I got something more than what you had said as the expectation. And sometimes I miss that too, but it's from a tooling standpoint, you can take in let people know that you typically respond to all your calls at the end of the day, or things like that. Again, so you're setting that expectation. Being treated disrespectfully or in a condescending tone. I know that sometimes we do have to be careful that we're not saying that you can't have something. It's not necessarily our role to speak as the person that is making the decision. Do you have a situation where a person on the call is kind of a bullying personality? And I think that, sometimes you can set the tone yourself by how you present yourself. We deal with a lot of older people. I am now one of those older people. But in my earlier days, when I was getting into this industry, and I didn't know everything, not that I do now, but I really didn't know everything then. Back in those days, I wore a shirt and tie. I was a shirt and tie guy at board meetings. And I did that purposely because even when I made a mistake, they saw me as being more professional. And I think that had I been there in just a golf shirt like I wear today, I think that I would have been looked at differently. It would have been like, oh, it would have been less of, okay, well, he's professional and he's going to find out, versus he's, almost professional and probably should have known. So I think that, the way you present yourself has a direct reflection on how you're perceived and how they will handle you. This industry's predominantly female managers, and even many of the office staff are females, and it's kind of uncanny sometimes how someone can get a phone call and they'll be like, I can't talk to this guy anymore. Bob, you have to handle him. And when I get on the phone, I talk to this person and I get back to them, or I go back to that manager and say, man, that was the nicest man, woman I've ever talked to. What do you mean that they were out of control? So sometimes probably my deep voice and or the fact that they heard the same story twice maybe made it easier for them to accept it. But even in the scenario where, in our organization, Jane takes some calls, and the same thing, you get the second person to have the same story, that a lot of times then it becomes acceptable and you can get past that bossiness. A lot of people think that by being bossy, that gives them that's going to help them get their way. Is this something I can do better, or do you like me? Do not like me. May snap them out of the attitude. And this kind of comes back from a story many, many years ago when I was a chef, and I had an owner that just gave me a really, really hard time. And I sat down with him one day in the hotel lobby, and I said, I just get the feeling you don't like me. And he's like, oh no, that's not it. I just look at things from an owner perspective, and you look at them from a chef's perspective. And I said, oh, okay. And I walked off and went back to work. But the thing that I got from that was he never dogged me out in a meeting ever again. He had, I don't know what respect I drew from him, or if he just, I brought it to his attention that he was being a jerk or what, but I never had a problem with him again. I've used that same approach a couple different times, and it's been amazing at how it has turned people around, where they finally figured out that I knew that they were bullying me and they recognized that they shouldn't be. So I just bring that to your attention. I think, when it comes to these types of things, I think as a manager standpoint, you should always talk to your CEO or your direct report to make sure that that whatever approach you take is based on your corporate expectations. And I think from a board standpoint, I think that this is another tool in your toolbox, that if you've got that irate homeowner, to be able to step back from the situation a little bit and be able to say something like this to them. Is this personal? And you might find that that it snaps them out of that that spot that they're in, and they recognize they're being a bully. I think unreasonable expectations, one-day turnaround. The parties need to understand that their projects require planning. The prompt turnaround of requests for input, approvals, or edits is not a reasonable expectation. Again, being cognizant that both parties have other interests in their life that have to be served as well. I mean, I think that from a more recent time, COVID has probably brought that to more people's attention than ever before. I think that although we received a lot of calls and people had time to watch the grass grow during COVID, that it also, from a board member standpoint, really showed that there was a lot of compassion, that board members, even though it wasn't always perceived that way that they were protecting the association by closing their pools, they were doing it for compassionate reasons. The fact that they weren't having in-person meetings was them being compassionate and in a lot of cases being tolerant because everybody was under this new pressure. So for those board members that are out there today, I appreciate the compassion that you probably showed your manager back in those days. Not that we're really out of it completely, but I guess we're all kind of into some midstream system at the moment. And I think that at some particular point, if it is a reasonable expectation, is there enough value to it that the management company can charge for their labor to get it done? And because then typically it's going to mean that there needs to be some overtime or something. Lengthy board meetings. Please read your, I'm sorry, recruit board members that properly prepare for meetings. Take and talk to your fellow board members and let them know that you need their help in prompt meetings. Use timed agendas. Share any overtime charges with managers so that they are being compensated for giving up more of their evening. That's my opinion. Every company functions differently. Explain the better board organization will get everyone home in time for their favorite TV program. Probably can get a lot more weight out of that. Encourage Zoom meetings. I think that that's probably been another great thing that came from COVID, is that people were forced to recognize that they could get as much work done and maybe even more done via Zoom call than they would have ever thought before. Because I can tell you in 2019, if I would have told our clients that we're going to start using Zoom calls, we would have had a mass exodus of people contacting other management companies because they would have thought that was an unreasonable expectation. But here we are today doing them on a regular basis, and everybody has learned that it is a very effective tool. Utilize the manager to discuss with board a zero-based budget within an income line. I mean, these are just some things that, point out the board's fiduciary responsibility. Remind the board that there's nothing in the governing documents that dictates the board is to save the association money. Consider reserving funds for the future, for future expenses. This is something that, is just kind of really starting to get some real traction in the St. Louis area. I think more and more the public are recognizing that it's something that we need to do. Top tips for aligning expectations. One, be honest and clear speaking. I think that I'm pretty passionate about this industry, but what has helped me the most, I think, is just being honest. Educate the board on manager challenges and vice versa. I think that, sharing that information between the board and the manager is helpful for both parties to recognize what the other ones are facing. From a management company and from an association standpoint, becoming a CAI member and or becoming a CAV or being a CAVL and taking the M100, if you're dedicated and you want to be an ongoing board member, the more information you can and experience you can pack in your role as a board member is just as important as what a manager packs into them as a manager. When people ask for things, say yes when you can, but don't be afraid to say no. If the governing documents say no, you didn't get on the board to be, although you were voted on the board as a popularity contest, that really wasn't the purpose. The purpose is to do the things that make the most sense for the association. So if you can say yes, do so, but don't be afraid to say no. Under promise, over deliver. Big thing that I'm hopeful that most of us try to do is that we, I'd rather say I'll get it to you by Friday and deliver it on Thursday than tell them Thursday and not be able to get to it till Friday. Try to anticipate the needs of your clients before they know their own need. Provide valuable communication, and do your best to keep updating the board on status of tasks. I think that that's probably a big thing that a lot of associations like to just kind of be kept in the loop. I think from an association standpoint, all management companies could be similar, but they are not the same. Increase the cost of services should equate to getting more, i.e. capabilities, time, and experience. To ask your manager, what do you think before making their decisions? Managers can burn out if not used properly. I think that that's as much in a board's responsibility as it is a management company's responsibility. Remember that portfolio management is a compromise. It saves the association from what it would cost if the manager were only assigned to one property. Use their time wisely. To come to meetings prepared to make decisions by reading the manager's report. To ask for time analysis if you don't think you're getting what you're paying for. If the management fee divided by the hours of service is less than $75, you may be getting what you're paying for. Analyze your practices and habits. Be your best critic. Be better tomorrow than you were today. I think if I see anything in myself, I think that that's what I've tried to do. I'll have to let everybody else be the judge on whether I accomplished that, but that was what I woke up in the morning hoping to do. Managers, please remember, management companies must work to raise the level and value of service to what is needed, not what the market thinks it should spend it. I think that this is what's held our industry back, is that we were so focused on creating inexpensive services or inexpensive management and lost sight of services. And I think that we could all do the industry well by providing, talking about the things that benefit the industry and what we can do to make their role as president or board member better, instead of trying to say, well, this is what I can do for $10. Again, do time studies to make sure clients are getting the value. I think this is what the managers need to evaluate. You know, if a client is 10% of their portfolio, they should be getting, in my mind, they should get 10% of their time. The fee versus time needs to be a win-win situation. You need, as a manager, need to feel like you're being compensated to properly compensated to provide a job. And the association needs to feel like they're paying a comparable fee to get services that they need. Kind of like management companies aren't all the same. Managers aren't the same either. Show your skill by being certified and getting your CMCA, AMS, and PCAM. The more you talk about the certifications, the more credibility you bring to our organization and to you as a person and to your company. I think that saying that I can do this job without the CMCA sells you short. You might be, you as a manager probably can do the job. CMCA doesn't guarantee that you can be a good manager, but what it does prove is that you know how to be a good manager. And I think that that's the key. And I think that the more we look for ways to improve our industry, make people recognize that it is a unique industry that we can be prepared for and that we can do a good job in, and they can get what they're paying for, versus maybe at some particular point, maybe they start comparing you to those that aren't being certified, and then you bring greater value to you personally. Be professional, dress professional. I would say that if you get up in the morning and you look at yourself and you say, yeah, that's a real professional look, then that's the way you ought to go in. But if you're in shorts and a t-shirt and you wouldn't want to be seen by a client, that might not be the way you want to portray yourself. So think about how you're being seen and perceived, and always try to make sure that it's a professional. Of course, we can always wear shorts at the CAI golf tournament. Take the time to educate your boards. I think we talked about this here internally just this morning, is that I think that we have to talk to them and explain to them from time to time what it is that we, how they can be better. If you wouldn't recommend your company to your best friends association, there's work to be done. I think that that's a thing that we all have to look at, and we have to, again, look at ourselves, our own perspective. Same thing goes for an association though. I mean, if an association has a hard time recommending someone else to be a board member, then there's work to be done there as well. Be your best critic. Work to be better tomorrow than you were today. Hopeful expectation that the companies they work with are valued partners, that we stop selling the we do everything for a fixed fee management. It is expected that valued business partners make a profit because it ensures that companies' financial health and their ability to serve the community for years to come. If you're beating your contractors to death, eventually they go bankrupt and or they have to cut services and you become dissatisfied. Wanting your contractors to be financially healthy is an important expectation of associations. The management companies stop selling price and do more explaining why communities deserve more. I mean, I think that one of the things I think about sometimes is when I talk to these prospects, they're like, oh, we don't need that. We don't need that. And it's like, well, why don't you need that? You're a volunteer. You're not getting paid anything. Why shouldn't you get the easiest way of doing something? Why is it that you should have to do it the hard way just because it might cost a little bit more? We should be out there saying you deserve everything, and an association should be paying for it so that we can make you as effective as possible. Accept that the expected outcome is more important than focusing on the cost. I think that we should look at that in all of the things that we do. Buying things that hopefully if you buy something at the dollar store, it's because it really is a saving and it's a good product and there's a reason that you're getting it less expensive versus you just bought a cheaper product that's only worth $1. That we raise the bar internally in the industry and the industries through the services we provide, our best practice experience and CAI credentials. So raise the bar in your organization so that you're seen as one of the best companies in our market, and just strive to do that. That would be my desire. I think that when we all talk about great things that are happening in our organizations, and my competitors talk about those same things, I get excited because I know that suddenly we made that important to that board, that having a CMCA manager has now gravitated to a point where people recognize the value that it provides. The other credentials, I think, add to that. The fact that we're working with business partners that are CAI members elevates the professionalism that we provide our clients, and they have a little bit better understanding of how the how we can do better things collectively than we might be able to individually. So I'm going to close with, so how do you want your steak? So is there any question, Kathy, or is there anything that I maybe didn't cover or that I can respond to?
No, we do have some questions. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jennifer.
First off, before we get into the questions, there were lots of comments about how hungry you made everybody, talking about steak and lobster. Everybody's hungry.
So
Sorry,
true.
there's no sandwiches today. We should. And of course, if we would have met personally, we would have also had lobster rolls. So I'm terribly sorry we weren't able to meet that either.
Next time, right? Maybe. First question, do you have any recommendations on perfecting the scope of service? I'm dealing with an association that came out of self-management and prior to that, bad management. Trying to get them to perfect a scope of service is challenging. Micromanagement is also a challenge.
Yeah, I think that's always, it's a huge challenge when an association comes from self-management because they're so used to having the entire buffet to themselves that it's hard to restrict their diet. I think that, you know, you can go back to the management agreement that talks about what things that were promised to them. I think that, you know, if you're spending 100 hours a month and you only charge them $100 a month for services, you're getting $1 an hour, and it would become very obvious that the workload is greater than what the fee supports. And that might be a tool for you or your CEO to try to address that with that particular owner. I think that just trying to drill down to the level, what's important. You know, I know that, you know, sometimes they'll have this crazy spreadsheet that tracks everything, but it's like, you know, you don't have time to keep that up and do the roles that you have. So sometimes you have to kind of look at what the value of something is that they're wanting you to do, and then saying, okay, let's prioritize it. And maybe even think about it as from a budget standpoint. You know, when we present our budgets to our boards, we always say, here's all the things that that have to happen, and here's your discretionary spending capability. And I think that if we looked at it with our boards, maybe a little bit from that same direction that says, okay, these are all of the things that I have to do. And then these are the things, this is how much time I have left over, that maybe they can then get a grasp of that there are some limitations.
Next one, is it normal for a management company to have a clause in their contracts to extend their management contract automatically after a new board is elected? It would extend it without any new signatures, so it would never expire.
So a lot of the management companies, and ours included, typically has an annual renewal in it. We typically, it doesn't go into auto renewal until it has exceeded the term that it is in. And when I've seen some others, I think that most of them are doing something similar to that. But I don't think that it's uncommon from a contract standpoint to have the auto renewals. I mean, we see these auto renewals in a lot of other industries, and they're typically more aggressive even than ours. And like elevator companies, sometimes I think that, you know, they'll renew for multiple years, whereas I think most of management companies will auto renew for a year. I think that the what's the other one I was thinking of? Elevators and trash companies usually have multiple years, and they usually, when they renew, they usually multiple. It usually is that same multiple that if it renews. So I don't think that that's uncommon. I think that when you have a new board, that it's helpful that there is an auto renewal in there. And because I think that a lot of times a new board comes on with an agenda, and they think that the reason that maybe things are a little bit chaotic, or the reason that they got on the board was some personal agenda, but it was their personal agenda was they thought that the management company was making all these bad decisions. And I actually had this scenario just earlier this week with a board that had a disgruntled board member, and we sat with this person, or sat with the entire board, and finally this person understood that it's the board that's been making all of the decisions that she's dissatisfied with, not the management company. So I think that by having an auto renewal is kind of helpful to give the manager enough time to be able to educate the oncoming board members so that they understand the processes and what the management company's influence has been. And then if they still feel like after, because typically they're coming onto the board and they would have a 2 or 3 year term, then in the second year, after they've really had a chance to measure things up, then if they feel like that the management company isn't really meeting their expectations, that they would be able to address that with the management company from a more educated approach, and then determine based on months of interaction whether the management needs to new management needs to be considered.
Next one. I am a retired CMCA, 37 years in condo management, currently serving on the board of a mediation nonprofit in St. Louis. Do you see any value of industry trained third-party mediation if expectations do not align?
Well, I think probably if you can't resolve it internally, then I suppose that having a mediator wouldn't hurt. It would seem to me, though, that if someone's, at least from my perspective, if I had a client that was just so dead fast that they couldn't see my perspective or the company's perspective, and that they were fixated on theirs, and the two were never going to align, I would probably just let them out of the contract versus going to mediation, because I don't know that there would be enough value to going to that level. Now, if it was a scenario where you only had a portion of the board that was disgruntled, then I think that educating them on their role as a board member and the interactions of management versus the board and so on would be probably more helpful than mediation.
Next one. How should you go about preparing a packet for a board meeting, and who should do the preparing of that packet?
Well, I mean, in this particular, I've tried to not tie CPM too much to our actions to this presentation, just because I know that other management companies function differently. But in our organization, the manager prepares the manager's report, and in our financial team prepares the financial reports, and they don't necessarily go out at the same time and or the same method. But the manager prepares the manager's report, puts together the agenda of things that they need responses on, supplies them with budgets or not budgets, but bids and things of that nature that need to be discussed, and then expects that they're going to get their marching orders from the board at that particular meeting. Now, the board president may also build an agenda of things that they want to address because, there may be something that's coming up that they expected that they were going to put in a new retaining wall in November, and now it's August and we should be talking about that now. Or someone stopped them on the street and said, why can't we get a new retaining wall? Things of that nature. So there could be multiple agendas. It could be that the manager goes through their report, then the president has its items, and then it goes around the table and everybody talks about the issues that they'd like to be brought up, or maybe everybody contacts the board in advance or the manager in advance and says, hey, by the way, I need to talk about a dog problem next door and some different things like that. And then that manager might put that into their agenda. A lot of times the agenda is a typical kind of agenda where it just says, call a meeting to order, minutes, and then it might just say manager report and then go on to different committee reports and things of that nature. And that board might be putting together that agenda and the manager's just talking about their report during their part.
Next one. Can you address the relatively high turnover in community management industry and how boards can ensure their manager isn't the next one to leave for another career?
Well, I think that, the one thing that we have to do as management companies is raise the importance of the manager. I mean, I think we've been a developing industry for as long as I've been in it. And I think that from the early years, we were all drawing people from other industries. Nowadays, it's more of a career path. So when I put an ad in the paper, I often am getting people that are already community managers contacting me. And I think that, based on some of the new hires at other management companies, it appears that they're getting some of the same kind of contact. I mean, we still get a whole slew of listings of people that are wanting to switch over from the apartment industry and stuff like that. But I think that management companies as a rule have to hold a higher priority to how do we improve the life of our managers? How do we improve their compensation? How do we make their portfolios more manageable? How do we, I think that, one of the things that a lot of association management companies have done, we used to do 12 meetings a year for every association, almost no matter their size. We're seeing more and more that associations are adopting 4 meetings a year, 6 meetings a year, and it's not that 12 months. That's something that's happening in our industry that is benefiting the managers, because now they don't have 8 meetings a month. They might have 1 month that has 8 meetings, but not every month, or maybe they can stagger them throughout the course of the year. So it's those types of things that we have to do to create interest in our industry. And it's not an easy thing to accomplish, because the rental industry, again, going back to what I said earlier, it's an income producer. So typically managers in rental communities are compensated as good, if not better, than what our industry has been able to do. So if that's where you think you're going to get somebody from, and that's probably the most reasonable direction to get people from, because they already understand building maintenance and things of that nature, is you're going to have to build a salary structure within your organization to do that. That's not easily accomplished if you're selling price. So I think that that we all have to look for ways to improve our organizations, raise the bar a little bit each year, and look for more qualified people and make it more inviting. The other flip side of the coin is we have to get our boards to recognize the value that having a CMCA manager has, and that maybe having a breadth of knowledge within the management company is important, or that having the latest in software is important, or whatever those other features might be. But we need the boards to stop thinking that they don't deserve to have a portal where they can approve or see invoices online or something along that line. Well, they can just email them to me. Well, why? So I think that it's those types of things that are going to help. And I'm hopeful that I've been a part of raising the value of managers in St. Louis. And I hope that through the rest of my career that I am able to continue doing that, because my greatest achievement would be just seeing the significant difference between what the community manager lifestyle was in 2000 or 1994 when I got into this business versus to the career position it is today, and just think that I had a little bit of a part of it would be very satisfying.
So real quick, we're coming up on 1 o'clock, and I want to be mindful of everybody's time. But one of the things that somebody has asked that I kind of would like to touch on and get your feedback on, Bob, is what are the early lessons for either management or boards related to the alleged lack of maintenance in the collapse of the condominium in Florida? Have you heard, and Kathy, you might be able to kind of weigh in on this as well. Are we hearing anything?
I have not heard too much in that regard. And probably because the board's standing behind their attorney. I think that in that particular case, I think there's certainly things, there's lessons there to be learned, that being proactive is by far better than being reactive. And even though that particular board was finally in the process of doing something, it wasn't soon enough. And I think that we could all take measure of that and saying, well, what's the consequence of something if we don't act? And I think that, and it can't be, I'm going to have to ask for money. It can't, the consequence, the significant consequence can't be, I have to ask for money. That should be the least important part of it. The real important part of it is, how do we protect our association? How do we protect our future values? How do we protect homeowners? I mean, I think that if you put those things first, and maybe had they a little bit, they would have maybe been addressing it years before, when they knew they had the problem and were still just trying to kick the can, trying to make people happy, maybe.
That's a good point, because as we've mentioned, with boards that rotate, people, serve for a little minute and then they're off, and then they're not involved with the association anymore. And the poor people that are sitting in place now that are having to deal with the decisions that were made of boards from the past, it's got to be very difficult for them. So I think that just goes to stress the importance of working with qualified management companies and qualified managers and people that eat, breathe, and live the industry best practices that CAI offers and teaches to our industry. So Bob, thank you for spending the time with us today and getting us all hungry for steak and lobster. We look forward to the delivery people coming to all of our offices to possibly give us our $100 bills too.
Yeah.
Maybe this afternoon we'll get a Grubhub delivery from somebody.
Send it to my house too, please. I wanted to let everybody know that I just posted something in the chat, a link to the CEI national website. They have some really great resources, questions boards should be asking themselves if they're prepared for a disaster and things like that. Lots of great resources in that link for you guys. I also wanted to just shout out a couple of events we have coming up. We have our St. Louis Trade Show on August 26th. We hope to see you if you are in the St. Louis area. We also have our first Kansas City Trade Show, which will be October 18th if you are in that area. And we also will bring our next in-person, our next program will actually be in person at the Lodge and Depair, the Maintenance Roundtable. We're excited about that. We are working on a virtual platform for that event as well. So stay tuned for that. And we thank you guys for being here. And thank you, Bob, for doing what you do. Thank you, Jennifer, for helping. And we hope to see you guys next time. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.